So now that we're running it off, we actually like when we use my laptop, here. That's what's on this way.
Yeah, 5:30 this morning. I was just happy with it.
Hey.
It's going to give us deposits. Most people don't think.
Yeah,
I guess we do. Yeah, pack this up and check it out.
which one is the actual?
Why not?
I'll see you later.
Yeah, take a look at it out the window.
That's good. I don't know where he turns off.
Oh,
that turned off in front.
Yeah.
Well, a little snow.
Just a little bit.
Well, maybe two.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, perfect.
Everybody good? Alrighty, well, welcome. Dan had to work today, so he asked me to introduce this week's speaker. Filling in this week, Alan Reppert was originally supposed to be here from AccuWeather, but he had a conflict. So we're thankful that Erik Pindrock, the forecaster at AccuWeather, could also be here this week. Thanks, Erik.
Yep. Thank you for having me again. I was just here a couple of weeks ago, so this week it's certainly a little more interesting in the short-term forecast, given the wintry precipitation going on right now. So the focus of this briefing is going to be heavily weighted toward the short-term and nowcasting, because that is the most crucial part of the forecast now. That's what is going to provide the most impacts to anyone that is out and about and traveling. But of course, I will get into the extended forecast a little bit toward the end. Right now, looking at the infrared satellite imagery, we can see certainly we have some clouds streaming in here from southwest to northeast. We had really an Arctic high pressure system build from Canada, build across Canada here, which provided a fresh injection of colder air into the northeast and mid-Atlantic states last night and this morning. Temperatures yesterday were well up into the 50s prior to the frontal passage, and then of course last night we were down well into the 20s. And so the stage was really set, at least across central Pennsylvania, for a wintry precipitation event, given that there was moisture surging in from the south and west. So if we again look at this surface map a little bit closer here, I notice where the high is now just across the upper St. Lawrence Valley in Quebec, and of course the flow around the high providing a northeast flow into New England and much of the northeast. And just recently here in Pennsylvania, our flow is now transitioning more toward the east. So we had a north flow overnight, northeast this morning, and now it's becoming more easterly, and eventually it's going to turn southeasterly, and that's going to bring us a little bit warmer air in the lower levels here later tonight. But until we get there, we obviously have some icing problems, and we have a pretty good what you would call a cold air damming situation going on right now. It's pretty classic, at least in this short amount of time. Now, as high pressure moves off the coast, we'll see the cold air damming scenario here dissipate a little bit, but at least for the time being, it's a pretty good wedge down the eastern side of the Appalachians. What I wanted to do first is start off again just by looking at the radar here, and this should be able to loop. Notice we have a wave of precipitation that moved from south to north this morning, and most of that, at least along the I-99 corridor and points to the east, has been in the form of snow. However, if you get into the Laurel Highlands and points to the west, a warm nose moved in and up the mountains there, which is not unusual. In fact, it's very typical of a CAD situation, a cold air damming situation. And so places here across Cambria, Somerset County here, Johnstown down to Somerset, and points to the west really didn't have much snow. If they did, it quickly went over to sleet and freezing rain. But again, Altoona, the I-99 corridor here in Blair County, Huntingdon County, including Center County, where we are, we had a good burst of snow, widespread coating to around an inch or so. Perhaps even a little locally higher amounts in parts of Huntingdon County, where they had a band set up a little bit earlier this morning. So that is the current radar. Notice there's not much to the southwest. We are going to be going into a bit of a lull here, and I think in terms of snow, we probably are just about done. My guess is that any more precipitation that comes in over the next few hours, it'll be light and will probably tend to be more drizzly in nature. And of course, with our temperature of 28, 29 degrees here, it would be freezing drizzle, at least on most surfaces that haven't been treated. If we, let's see here, I wanted to go into to show you some soundings, because of course, looking at atmospheric soundings is very crucial to determining what the precipitation type is going to be in any situation. And so right now, what I have up is the NAM sounding here from 12Z. This is looking at UNV, at State College, every hour starting at 10 a.m. or 15Z. So around 10 a.m., here's what the NAM had as a sounding. Of course, if anything was falling, it would be snow. Going ahead here to 11 a.m., this is about the time we started to get some snow across much of Center County. Notice the sounding is indicative of snow, and in fact it's pretty classic, where here at the surface, we're looking at mid or upper 20s here, going up to around a sounding that's below freezing here, still in the upper 20s, even when you get up to 850 millibars. And then of course, as you continue up, the sounding gets colder. Now, if we fast forward here and go to noontime, this is about a half hour ago, the NAM still suggesting that any precipitation falling would be would have a snow sounding, and of course that's what we've been getting. So right off the bat, this tells me that analyzing the NAM model, at least the sounding data, the NAM appears to have a good grasp of what is going on dynamically across a wide profile of the atmosphere. So this would tell me that we can probably trust this sounding and trust this model, at least in the short term, to see what happens. So let's go ahead and let's see what the NAM shows here for State College, going to 1 o'clock. Still suggesting that anything falling would be in the form of snow. But notice let's see here. Notice here at noon, we have a pretty saturated sounding, not quite saturated at the low levels, indicative of kind of some breaks in the precipitation. But if we go to 1 o'clock, notice how we still have not a completely saturated low-level sounding, and so that would also tell me that the NAM is picking up on the precipitation being spotty in nature and not a complete shield that's going to impact everyone and be a steady shield of precipitation. So if we go to 2 o'clock, let's see what it has. Still, now the sounding here, let's go up to about 800 millibars, and look at that, we're getting about a 31-degree temperature there. So still just below freezing, which would suggest anything falling probably would be snow if it's steady enough. Now, if the precipitation is light, like we're thinking it's going to be, most likely any precipitation, any kind of snowflake wouldn't have a chance to really develop, and instead it would fall through the column and probably be either drizzle or maybe a really tiny sleet pellets. But another thing to notice too is look where the warm nose is. 31 degrees here at 813 millibars. And let me just slide over a little bit. Here on the left-hand side, you can see the pressure level. So this is actually higher than 850. If we go down to 850 millibars, you can see it's actually a degree Fahrenheit colder. So our warm nose is coming in above 850 millibars, and that's key because if you just look at 850s, you may not be getting a complete representation of what the atmospheric profile is, and that may lead you astray in terms of precipitation type. So let's go ahead here to 3 o'clock. Notice, look at that, straddling the 0-degree isotherm here from about from 870 up to about 800 millibars. So still, you could argue that probably have a mixed bag of precipitation if anything's coming down. A little bit of snow, sleet, freezing rain, freezing drizzle. Really, everything's on the table, I think, with this kind of sounding. But notice the low levels of the atmosphere. The NAM's still showing it somewhat dry, so still not indicating a real steady precipitation even at 3 o'clock. So I think a very short-term forecast for the Center County region would be, we have this band of snow lifting to the north now. Between now and probably mid-afternoon, there's not going to be a lot of precipitation. It's probably going to be spotty, it'll be light, maybe it's a few flurries, maybe it's some freezing drizzle, light freezing rain, but nothing that's real heavy. And in terms of impacts, given that we have the sun out, or we have the radiation from the sun making it through the clouds, given that temperatures are slowly inching up, I doubt that there would be any significant road problems if the roads have been treated at least through 3, 4 o'clock, given that we're not expecting high-intensity precipitation rates. Now, as we go later on in the afternoon, let's go through, this is 4 o'clock here. Notice we now have a sounding where the warm nose has punched through the 0-degree isotherm here around 850 and a little bit above. We're up to about 34 degrees, just above 850. So snow is now out of the question, no more snow. But notice here our low-level cold air going up just off the surface, our temperature is still in the upper 20s according to the NAM. So likely we would be getting a mixed bag of light freezing drizzle, freezing rain, or a little bit of sleet if we were to get any precipitation here. Continuing on, going to 6 o'clock, here's something to note. Going from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, the one thing that strikes out, or the one thing that I notice is the sounding and the depth of the moisture in the sounding. Here is 5 o'clock, but now keep an eye up here, more in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, near 700 millibars. Watch what happens at 6 o'clock. It becomes saturated. So this is telling me you have a deeper plume of moisture moving into the area this evening or by 6 o'clock, and that would suggest a better chance at steadier precipitation. And in this case, this to me looks like a freezing rain or a mixture of rain, freezing rain, depending on where you are. Because the NAM by 6 o'clock actually suggests that we are already approaching freezing. And if you go up a little bit in elevation, you're still hanging on to the upper 20s. So I think when we get into a steadier precipitation shield later today, it's most likely going to come in as freezing rain or rain. And again, impacts, because that's what's important here to people that are traveling home. I would be concerned if we get some steadier precipitation as the sun sets, it gets dark, we lose that solar radiation, especially any roads that haven't been treated. I think there could be some issues starting late this afternoon and going into early this evening as we get a heavier precipitation to fall into an air mass that is still at or below freezing. So going here to 7, or you know what, I might have been off by an hour. This is 6 o'clock, so this is 5 o'clock. So now, my apologies, this is the 6 o'clock hour. Notice that we still have a saturated sounding here, and still the NAM is suggesting at 6 o'clock we're at 32 at the surface. By 7 o'clock, the NAM takes the surface just above freezing to 33 degrees. So now, again, this is a model, so you want to, you have to make your own forecasts. And given the fresh injection of cold air, given that we're still in the 20s right now, it's still certainly possible that there's areas, even in State College, that are still lingering around the freezing mark. But notice where the inversion is, at least in Center County. The inversion goes up to about 950 millibars or so. And notice here off to the side, we have an elevation also attached to the reading that I'm looking at. Around 2,000 feet or so is actually where the coldest air is going to be. And sometimes that's contrary to what you might think in freezing rain situations. You might just think, oh, let's put it in the valleys because as you go up in elevation, temperature's warm. And that is true to a point, but if you look at where the inversion is, it's actually the coldest air is sitting at around 2,000 feet above sea level. And so in Center County, what that means is that your biggest freezing rain issues are actually going to be in the higher elevations. So you get up toward Mount Nittany, or you get up, if you're going up over 7 mountains, up 322 there near the border of Mifflin County and Center County. Some of those places are going to be the last to actually get above freezing, and therefore those areas are probably where I would be most concerned about some icing, not only on the roads but even on the trees coming into this evening. So if we go to 8 o'clock, notice the sounding continues to warm. 9 o'clock again, the sounding is warming. Still, NAM hanging on to near freezing sounding just above the elevation that Penn State sits at here. This is about 1,600 feet. And so basically what this all boils down to is that it's a very interesting and a challenging forecast for sure, but we at least have, we can put some faith in some of these models that, they probably are latching on to an idea that is reasonably going to be in the ballpark. So that was a sounding. What also is a good thing to look at here and is a cross section. And so I'm just curious, how many of you have looked at a cross section or know what they are? Just so, okay, a few of you have looked at them. So essentially what a cross section is it's like looking at a sounding, basically what we were just looking at, but it's over an area in the vertical. So for instance, this cross section is going from Morgantown, West Virginia, notice the code up here at the top left, going up to State College here on the right. And so essentially we're traveling from one side of the Appalachian Mountains to the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, from west to east. So this cross section is from 1 o'clock on Tuesday, and again, this is a NAM depicted cross section. Notice in Morgantown, bam, you got a very strong warm layer here coming in between 850 and 900 millibars, and it's already above freezing at all levels here. And notice that warm nose punches into the Laurels here, and let me step back here. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself. For anyone that isn't aware, the colored lines here that you see, the blue, the purple, the red, those are temperature lines. They're isotherm lines in every 2 degrees Celsius. And then we have the wind barbs depicted here by these black lines at the pressure levels indicated on the left. And again, the wind barbs are the black lines. And then the green shading that you see here is moisture, which is depicted, relative humidity, which is depicted at the bottom in a percentage. So this dark shade of green that you see that I'm highlighting here would be equivalent to probably relative humidity values of 90 to 100%. And basically, you can interpret them as clouds or precipitation. So clouds, or precipitation in this layer from Morgantown to State College. And then lastly, on the bottom here, it actually we can plot elevation. So notice elevation here in Morgantown is actually similar to State College. As we head to the east of Morgantown, we head up some of the mountains here, get into the Laurel Mountains, and then come down off the Laurels into parts of the valley here just east of the Allegheny Front, and then we come up a little bit when we get back to Penn State. So I hope I'm not confusing anyone, but I just wanted to go over that real quick. But anyway, going back to the cross-section, this is also a great tool to look at to see what your precipitation type might be. And so by 1 o'clock, this cross-section from the NAM actually already shows a layer of warm air that is near freezing already at 800 millibars. So again, notice for the NAM here, the warm nose is coming in quite high. It's not at 850. It's actually at an elevation higher than 850 millibars, probably maybe 6,000 to 7,000 feet. But notice here a deep freezing layer across State College. If we fast forward a little bit, let's go ahead we'll go ahead 6 hours. We'll go ahead to 0Z this evening, or 7 p.m. We can get the cross section up, and we can see what the cross section is like across the region here. Notice going here on the left-hand side, Morgantown well into the warm air mass, and here the warm nose coming in aloft, still very well evident between 800 millibars and 850. We're already at over plus 2 degrees Celsius. So this again confirms that we're not going to be getting snow this evening if we're getting precipitation. Here at the surface, though, notice this is the 0 degree isotherm, the purple here, and this snakes all the way back to the Laurels, and then notice how you don't see it anymore here at the ground. That means the NAM, this particular model here showing the temperature being at or maybe just below freezing in a rather large column near the surface. So we're probably hovering around 31, 32 if this is right. But then if we go ahead another 6 hours to 6Z, we will see that we will be well above freezing. All layers will be well, actually, no. There's a little surprise to see this, but NAM's still showing a very small sub-freezing layer just off the surface here. But more than likely at the ground, we're probably running at or just above 32. Now I'm going to go into some of the more of the mesoscale models here, just to show a precipitation type, more or less what I was talking about earlier. The 4-kilometer NAM is a good tool to use, and you can get it right here off the e-wall. This is precipitation type, and this is noontime, so this is our first batch going through at noon. And then if we go ahead here to 4 o'clock, notice that it's showing if there is precipitation around, it's likely in the form of frozen precipitation across Center County. Maybe when you get into the northeastern part of the county, the cold air is deep enough for a little sleet or snow, but likely it's going to be sleet or freezing rain or freezing drizzle here. And then continuing ahead into early this evening, this is 8 o'clock. Notice that the NAM is suggesting, or the 4K NAM is suggesting precipitation types are largely freezing rain or maybe some rain in the valley. And notice you can see it trying to pick up on elevation a little bit. Notice here in the valley it's showing green, but if you go up a little in elevation, it is showing a little bit of pink, indicative of that colder air that's going to be hovering just above the ground here in Center County. Once we go ahead to later tonight, I think we are going to erode the cold air at most levels, at least enough to get us to around 33, where I think if we get any precipitation, it falls in the form of light rain here in Center County or in State College. You know, I've seen cases before. If you go, again, just up to some of those ridge tops to get up to 2,000 feet, they may have a struggle to get to 32 or to get above 32. And part of the reasoning for that is going to be the flow is going to be very weak here. If we go here, this is again looking at. We'll go to the GFS just for a different model. You know, going up to the GFS here, this is 925 millibars. We can see our wind barbs. It might be a little tough to see here, but if you look at the wind barbs at 925, they're not all that strong, suggesting that there's not that, you know, the winds aloft when you get up to 850 and above are going to be strong, so we should have good mixing. But when you get below that inversion, the winds are not going to be mixing very strongly, and so that means that temperatures, once they get to near 32, especially at the ridge tops, I think are going to struggle to go above 32 until we can get some mixing, which may not occur until the day on Wednesday. And so that's something else to keep in mind here. But I know I spent a lot of time there on the short-term part of the forecast. Lastly, at least with the short term, I'll conclude just with the GFS lamps depicting our temperatures here in State College. Notice how we have a slow rise to 32 by 0Z or 7 p.m. and then the lamps do forecast a gradual warming overnight as our winds shift from the east to the southeast. And maybe it's a little bit overzealous with getting us up into the upper 30s by morning, but I do think by the time we get past maybe 9, 10, 11 o'clock, we're probably at 32, 33, and maybe poking up toward 34 after midnight and for the overnight hours. But again, some of those ridge tops, higher elevations, will be ones to watch. Looking at the day tomorrow, that feature that the precipitation that's going on now lifts off toward the north as a weak wave of low pressure that will bring New England wintry mix later tonight into tomorrow. And instead for us, I think we get somewhat crapped out. Excuse the terminology. We'll get somewhat, you know, we'll stay cloudy and rather dreary throughout the day. As again, I'm not quite sure we see the winds aloft mix down to the surface to actually get any kind of clearing. And so what I think that means is that our temperatures will slowly come up on Wednesday, probably get into around 40 or into the low 40s. If we're lucky, we might get to 45 if we can get a little mixing. But there could be a shower, maybe a bit of drizzle around, especially across the lower highlands where we have already cold advection coming in by the end of the day. We can see here by 18Z Wednesday, 1 p.m., we have cold advection shifting into the Pennsylvania here. Then going ahead in time, it's almost a carbon copy of what just happened. We have high pressure building down for Wednesday night and Thursday. Now the positioning of this high is going to be a little bit farther to the south. So if you remember what I showed you the surface map, the high this morning was up toward Quebec. Well, this next high pressure coming in from Canada is going to be pushed a little bit farther to the south here across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. And if we track that across the area for the day Thursday, I think we actually see some sunshine on Thursday, but it will be a colder day. Temperatures probably struggling to get out of the mid-30s. But again, we should see some sunshine. So a seasonably chilly day for early December. But as we go into late Thursday and then Friday, high pressure will slide off of the northeast coast thanks to a rather progressive pattern that we are in. And then, you know, anytime you get high pressure sliding off the east coast, the flow around the high is clockwise, so you have to watch the flow. It'll transition from north to northeast to east and eventually southeast, and it just so happens that a disturbance bringing a lot of beneficial rain to California, maybe even some flooding to Southern California, that is going to eject out into the plains, and we will be watching that system potentially impacting our weather for Friday with what could be a very similar setup in that you have a shallow dome of cold air entrenched across the northeast and mid-Atlantic, and then you have precipitation that is going to be overriding that cold boundary, at least initially, on Friday. And so, while Thursday looks dry, Friday looks like a day of maybe increasing clouds with perhaps a little bit of light wintry precipitation again moving in late in the day Friday and Friday night. Now, looking at 850 millibars here, notice how Friday 18Z, the GFS is flooding in the warm air, going into 0Z. This would be a non-snow sounding. But let's take a look at 925. Again, let's take a look at where that inversion might set up a little bit. At 925, notice that classic wedge of cold air with the isotherms there. I mean, State College is certainly below freezing at 925 millibars, and we're already getting precipitation that is moving into the area per the GFS. And notice here, even by the end of the day Friday, classic central Pennsylvania cold air damming with warming temperatures in southeast PA, warming temperatures in Pittsburgh, but Center County, the I-99 corridor, up toward Williamsport, and then heading up toward Binghamton, New York, and then kind of expanding out, you maintain that cold air damming situation. So, really kind of quickly summing it up here, because I see it's getting close to 1. Obviously, the main impact, the main forecast problems are in the short term, which is where people are going to be most interested. Most people probably aren't going to worry too much right now about the forecast Friday. They're going to want to know, how am I going to get home this afternoon? Are the roads going to be okay? And so that's where the focus of the forecast is. And again, I think roadways in State College, I think, that are salted and treated are probably going to be okay, through the rest of the mid to late afternoon. There is a time frame I would worry about when we get a steadier batch of precipitation in here, perhaps late today and early this evening, where there might be some issues. But again, I think anyone that's traveling over a mountain, if you're traveling maybe up 322 toward Phillipsburg or heading toward Seven Mountains, higher elevations, I think, could have more impacts from the freezing rain into this evening. Then once we get rid of that ice threat tonight, we warm it up into the 40s tomorrow, rather cloudy, have a nice dry day Thursday, and then our next wintry precipitation again comes late Friday, which looks to be a wintry mix changing to rain as we have lack of blocking, which again should allow warm air to eventually win out again. So that's about all I have. I know I talked a lot. Hopefully some of that sunk in.
Anybody have any questions for Eric? Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks very much, everybody, for coming. Next week is the last discussion, and it will be Rich Brum with the Weather Service, so one to see. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, thanks. Nice to meet you, Dave. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for coming and doing it.
Yeah, no problem.